Welcome to My New BFF, a part of the Black Love Podcast Network. I'm Codie Elaine Oliver, co-creator of Black Love. Shout out to Tommy, my husband and other co-creator. And I am joined today by someone who I'm sure will be my new BFF by the end of this conversation. She's an unapologetic sexologist, edutainer, and activist, and even wrote a book, The Girl's Guide to Sex Education. So, welcome, Michelle Hope.
Thank you for having me.
Rah.
Thank you.
Rah, rah. So I certainly want to learn everything about you and how you got into the profession that you're in, which I think is vitally important, especially as a mom, trying to teach my kids about their bodies. But my first question for you, because I am who I am and love is my thing, who taught you the most about love?
That's a good question. I think that when we think about what love is, there are different spheres of love. And I think they're all rooted in compassion and empathy and this idea of giving to others. So I would definitely have to say my grandmother, who was a woman that served in World War II. And then once she got out of the war, worked a ton as a single parent at some point and then volunteered. When I was in kindergarten, she became the kindergarten helper. And she did not leave that classroom until I was 22 years old, which put her in her 80s.
Oh, wow.
So just this idea of being forever in service to another, like that is, I think, the core to what love is, and unconditional love. And then from there, it goes to the different spaces, whether that's romantic, whether it's platonic. And I think there is a amalgamation of experiences and people that taught me what love was.
Yeah.
But I think it all comes from that place of empathy and compassion and service.
Do you know when you realized that? Like if your grandmother was doing all of this from the moment you came onto this earth, when did you clock it? When did you say, wow?
I mean, honestly, it's just been such a constant in my life. Child, I was raised Catholic too. So, when you in the church, you always loved by somebody named Jesus. Okay. So I can't pinpoint when I knew it. Because I think about, I had a girlfriend when I lived in Los Angeles. And she was like, girl, if you ain't ready to kill a mother, then you ain't really in love.
Whoa.
So and that's the kind of that romantic love. And I was like, that seems a bit unhealthy.
Yeah.
So I think there's just been so many experiences in my life. There's not one space where I was like, aha, now I know what love is. And quite frankly, the older I get, the more maybe I don't know what love is. I think it's such a living thing. Love is a journey. It's not a race. On any relationship, you know what I'm saying? On any relationship front, whether it's platonic, familia, or romantic. It's not a destination. It ebbs and it flows and it changes. It's just...
Yeah. Whew. And add to that it looks different for different people. And you are absolutely right. Like we spend our whole lives like saying, well, love is this, or hearing love is that, and sort of going, oh, I identify with that, or I don't. And that's okay. I think what matters is as long as like your self-love is intact, which is also a journey, and whoever you end up with, whoever you choose to be your partner, you all love each other in a way that you can understand. That's what love is.
Yeah. And I always say your first relationship starts with self. And if that is off, all the other relationships will be off. So self-love is really important. The irony of that, though, is we're not taught to understand what self-love is, first and foremost.
No.
Especially if you grow up in the church. Okay. And then two, it's not until we get much older that we start to really ground ourselves in this healthy self-love. And it takes the maturation of self and self-discovery to get there. So go figure.
Yeah. Oh man. I think we could just wrap up right there. You just dropped all the gems. Okay. No, I have real questions. So I would love to know how you became a sexologist.
Yeah. So I am biracial. I'm from Indiana. My mother is a lesbian third wave feminist, which is a whole other show, because being biracial with a third wave lesbian mother there's a lot there to unpack. And, my mom was an activist for gay rights and was active, very active. So I started going to coalition building meetings and going to marches at about 4. And, while my mother was out to me, it was not safe for her to be out in Indiana with a biracial child in the 80s living in a trailer park. So the concept of sex didn't come till much later. The concept of love and that love is
Right.
love is
For
love
sure.
was there first. And so, you know, being biracial in a space like Indiana, hyper-sexualized to the 100th degree because I looked so different than everyone else. And I've had the same body type since middle school, since I was about 12. So I was always seen as being sexy or erotic or provocative. In high school, you know, I would wear some type of clothes and a white girl could wear the exact same outfit. I would be sent home. But this is a very normal occurrence. It happens quite a bit in classrooms across America today. And then I, you know, in middle school and coming of age, I learned about, you know, Dr. Ruth, Dr. Drew. I saw LaToya Jackson on Playboy, and I was like, Jenny McCarthy in that era. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do. So I became very interested, and I started like consuming Dr. Drew, Loveline, and I started reading Dr. Ruth, and I got very interested there because, again, sex was not a conversation. There was no sex talk in my house. And I think the extent that I did finally get was men ain't shit. Get yours first and get out. Right? Like, okay. And so I experienced sexual assault in high school. I didn't have anybody to talk to. There weren't conversations happening. I thought it was my fault. I went through some dark...
You couldn't talk to your mom? You didn't talk to your mom?
No, it just wasn't... I felt so much shame. And I think that is a learned behavior. And in my experience working with adolescent youth, it's a common theme, actually, to feel like, oh, well, it's my fault. But then again, you look at the news media, we're always telling girls it's their fault. And that boys will be boys. So then I became a stripper, like all good biracial girls out of a trailer park do to get out. Okay. And that is where I learned about sex and sexual liberation.
Okay. I feel like there's a lot. Wait, I have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Because I'm hearing Dr. Drew and Dr. Ruth, which is like a, you know, medical, biological, but also sexual perspective on our bodies and sex. And in high school, you're like consuming this because I remember Dr. Drew too. I'm hearing these Playboy covers and seeing these women and saying, I want to, perhaps I'm putting words in your mouth, but I want to own my body like that. And then I'm hearing the choice to be a stripper. Was that a financial choice also like predicated upon that ownership? That like, was it an empowered choice for you, or did it feel like the only thing you could do?
So here's the deal. When we look at the science, we know that there is a direct correlation between individuals who experience sexual assault and then exaggerated sexual prowess, especially if it happens in early adolescence. There is a direct correlation there. And in addition to that, there is some literature and some scholarly articles out there that draw the line between sexual assault and becoming an adult performer. Okay. Sometimes what happens is when you don't get the care and the mental health care that you need after experiencing a trauma like sexual assault, you start to then internalize and put yourself in dangerous situations and or thinking you can reclaim that power. So there is a portion to that reclaiming your power part. And I think when I think about the Playboy bunnies and the Maxim girls and all that and wanting to do that, I think it was just almost like a defense mechanism to being hypersexualized for so long and internalizing this idea like this is all I'm good for. Now the thing about going into dancing, I was a terrible high school student, awful, barely graduated high school, and you have to think about the spaces like what is oppression and who power and oppression, who has the most power. At the time, I was a person of color. I was female. I did not have an adequate level of education. I didn't have a skill set to get a job. I needed money. So what did I have? I had been told my whole life I was sexy. So I was like, I think it was subconscious. You know, I had these ideas of being the next Halle Berry and being a model and getting out of this small podunk town. And I thought that was the way to do it. Now, here's the thing. What they don't tell you about becoming a dancer is the first step on the stage is the second hardest step. The absolute hardest step when you are in that profession is stepping off the stage for good, because you get addicted to the money. You're making
Got
cash
it.
money so
Yeah.
quickly, so easily. It's a no-brainer. It doesn't take a lot of skill. And by that, I mean, it takes a lot of skill. But,
Right.
I don't want to reduce the profession. I'm just giving you my perspective in that time and space and how I
Right.
see it, 20 years later. And again, looking at the literature, when you think about how we live in a patriarchal society and how men are usually higher earners, which means that men use their sexuality, their gender, to get ahead, to get money, to get power. So why are we
Yep.
surprised if women get on a stage, dance around a phallic-like symbol to get money? Because
Yeah.
again, this is how we're taught. And there is some power in that. Dancing around a pole, kind of it's a phallic symbol, and you're getting money. So it's a very powerful thing for some people.
So and I understand it, to your point, the hardest part is stepping off for good, right?
Yeah.
What went into that for you? You said 7 years?
Yeah, I was tired. And the money wasn't there, and I wasn't willing to do what needed to be done to get the money, i.e. body augmentation, i.e. putting myself in. I mean, listen, it got to a point like my knees went bad. I mean, it is a very physical.
There's no busted challenge. There's no busted
now.
challenge for
Not
you
over
now.
here. Not unless you want to see me fall down. It just came down to, I was tired of being exploited because the money just got bad. It got to a point where the money was not there. And I was tired of working 6 hours in 7-inch heels, listening to the verbal abuse, physical abuse. Like it is a much more dangerous job than people think. I think we have romanticized the life of a stripper. It's not that awesome, people, like at all. Because you could work for 5 hours and you have to tip out the house. You got to pay your bartenders. You got to pay the house mom. You got to pay the DJ, and you got to pay security. So when you start to think about that, there were days I would walk out with $45.
Girl, okay, I see.
It just wasn't for me anymore.
So 7 years later, making that decision, what happened next professionally?
I mean, I was putting myself through school. I also had a relatively high profile in community service work. I had done some beauty pageants. I had done public speaking. I was I worked in high schools as a motivational speaker, talking about body image. And I had these two totally different lifestyles that never crossed. Now, because of social media, child, they're going to find you. But I had two totally separate lives. Yeah. And there was this duality. I was running an after school program for free at a shelter downtown on Skid Row in Los Angeles, taking the money I was making at night to buy supplies. And I started, like I said, speaking at local high schools. And at the time, T.I.'s I'm in Love with a Stripper was popular. Okay. You know how many of these young women I was in classrooms with all over the West Coast, from Compton to Sacramento, Hawaii to Nevada, traveling all up and down the West Coast, making way more money. And these girls was like, I want to be a dancer, because they had no idea. And I was like, trust me.
Yeah.
You don't want to be a dancer. And then I would tell stories like, oh, I have a friend that was a dancer. And let me tell you, it's not what you think. And that is kind of how I started to see the path I wanted to go on. I was in undergrad. I was taking classes here, taking classes there. And I started seeing all this sexuality come up in these middle school classes I was speaking in, these high school. And I've always been real down to earth and real trill. I'm going to keep it real. You going to get real raw and unapologetic, right?
Yep.
And so I was seeing this and I was like, okay, something is happening here. There were so many issues around sexuality and I'd always been interested. So then that drove me to go and get my master's in marriage family therapy with an emphasis in Afghan family studies. Now, it was a great school, but halfway through the program, I realized, Black people aren't going to therapy. They don't have access. And by access, I don't just mean health insurance or doctors that look like them. I mean the very knowledge to know how beneficial it is to your overall health. Yep. It's like other communities have been systematically hiding this knowledge from us. Go figure. You know what I'm saying? That's a word. Okay.
Absolutely. They've been doing that since we got here, since they brought us here.
Come on. And
hiding information.
And see, for me, again, being biracial, I had been in and out of therapy growing up because I was dyslexic. I was attention deficit. I was biracial. And so I had the knowledge. I had that privilege because let's remember, You could stand in a space of privilege and a space of oppression simultaneously. And so my experience of sexuality is in a very black and white view. And that is what got me to say, okay, my community, they need practical, applicable tools that they can use. So, because I had been working at Skid Row, I had been doing work at battered women's shelters. I'm traveling in the classroom, and I'm literally watching what I would call like a slow train wreck of why we see such high rates of intimate partner violence.
Yeah.
Black women murdered at the hands of their partners. Like, I've been watching it. So I went into the school. I said, well, Black people aren't going to therapy. So I shifted into human development and adult learning theory, because at this point I'd been to enough school to know that all this shit was learned behavior. And I needed to help people unlearn and then give them those practical and applicable tools so they could improve their lives in that moment.
And what did that look like right away? How do you, to me, it sounds almost impossible to get schools to, buy into the idea of talking about sex or therapy to young people.
Yeah. So I worked for a place called Barbizon. Okay. If you're old enough, you remember it was the modeling and acting school, right? So this is before I even went to grad school. I would just test the waters and they would just leave me in the classroom alone with children, which, by the way, that was before you had to have a background check to be with kids.
Yeah.
So I might be dating myself a little bit, but in that era, that in the 2000s, people weren't as concerned. They were like, oh, you work for a reputable company. Okay. So I would just let the students talk and I listened. And then from there, I had also been dabbling in on-camera talent, hosting. In LA, you're a slasher. You're a model / speaker / act. You're a slasher. So I had all these skills, and I knew being in front of people was my thing. So when it came to schools, I just started where I knew to go. And I was in New York, and I bartended in my final year of grad school, and I started talking to people about sex and sexuality, healthy relationships in Black communities. Next thing you know, a customer was like, yeah, would you do a creative writing class with students here in Harlem? And that's how I ended up at Harlem Children's Zone as a creative writing teacher. The irony in that is I'm dyslexic, so I can't spell for shit. So I faked it till I made it. I was getting out of grad school. And again, as a creative writing teacher, I'm reading these young people's stuff and I'm like, woo, sexuality all over again.
Yeah.
And I raised it up. I took it to my superiors and they were like, nah. And then I said, well, I'm just going to have to get a full-time job in here to prove my theory. So I became a caseworker. Okay. Worst job ever. Academic case management. You have it literally is social work. You have a caseload of 35, 40 students. You're responsible for their academics, working with the school and with home. 75% of my kids were failing, but I also had to meet with them regularly. So I got to know them. I put a gay pride sticker on my desk, and I'll never forget. Somebody was like, I don't know if you should have this here. And I was like, why? And they were like, they don't talk about those things here. I was like, why? And I just collected all the information and I presented it. Yeah. Nobody listened. And then I just kept squeaky wheeling it out. And finally, I got involved in an additional space to try to do some healthy body classes. 5 years later, after an innovation grant, it's now a part of their operations program. And we changed the narrative. We changed the mental model. But it was people. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding? Do you really want to know what people said to me when I told them what I do?
Absolutely.
Is this an adult channel?
Get it.
Girl, people would look at me and be like, how many dicks did you have to suck to get that job? I mean, it was the most disrespectful things. I've heard it. And interestingly enough, when I say it to people that are not Black and brown, which hurts me, they're like, oh my God, that's very fascinating. Tell me more. But oftentimes, in the immediate reaction from my own community is, ooh, what is that? That's not a thing. That's not a real class. But here's again, systematic oppression. You didn't know it was a thing.
Yeah.
It is
right.
Thing.
We don't know. And the beauty of right now, I think, and this is one question I have for you, is I think there is progress happening in our community. Yeah, I see your face. I want to know what you think. Are we truly getting to a place? Are we on our way to a place of understanding the importance of sexual conversation or at least body positivity and biological conversation with our children?
It
Nah, you're
depends.
saying no.
I
Uh-huh.
here's the thing. We have done a lot, but we have so far to go.
Yeah. Yes.
Here's what people need to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Sexuality and race and
Mm-hmm.
socioeconomics and education level, they are all one thing. Intersectionality is key here. And
Mm-hmm.
sexuality touches my saying from the womb to the tomb. Sexuality
Mm-hmm.
is a part of your everyday life, whether you realize it or not. When you think about how we raise children, when do we start assigning the gender for these children? Before they're even here. Gender
Mm-hmm.
is a social
Mm-hmm.
construct. We are very rooted in the church. We have very rigid expectations on gender roles, gender norms, and that's just
Yeah.
one aspect of it, right? And that permeates not just heteronormative relationships, but all the other varying relationships. There are still these very rigid gender norms. And until we can start removing these ideas of gender norms, we'll never
Yeah.
be able to overcome the hump of homophobia or transphobia.
Yes, for sure. And
So,
and I think too on the most basic level, what it does right now, the way that we box in our kids from the day that they're, from the day that we see a penis on a sonogram, I think that what it does is it teaches them that they cannot express themselves fully and be themselves. And that does not mean I mean I have to say this because we literally just Black Love has a YouTube channel and we have a show called Round Table, Ladies Round Table, and the ladies are five of them, two or three of them are moms, and they were talking about their sons, and if their sons want to wear nail polish or something, like that's okay with them because they want to allow them to express themselves however they want. And there was a lot of commentary there, and I get it.
mm-mm,
I get why people are like, not me, right? But at
right,
the end of the day, we have to recognize that we're not going to do anything to make our child gay or abnormal. Like, our
right.
child is going to be who they are, and we have to give them the tools to express themselves fully, to be truthful and honest with us, because it isn't just saying this is too feminine or this is too masculine. It's telling them they can't talk to us, they can't be honest with us
Bingo,
about
that
what goes
part,
on.
that part.
I'm like, I want you to know that whatever you think and feel will be accepted by me,
Yep.
and that you should always be honest with me and tell me the truth, and that I will love you. Period. I will love you. I don't want my kids to ever feel like they can't talk to me about something.
I think that's really important. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think it's important
No, go for it.
because that is the aha moment oftentimes
Yeah.
when I work with
Yeah.
adults and when I talk about the importance of this. It doesn't just come down to loving your children whether they want to express with nail polish or whatever. I think it's the conversation, letting your
Yeah.
kids know you can bring things to them, because what adults
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
forget is that we were all children. And the reason people don't like talking about sexuality or gender or any of that is because we all have trauma. Okay, baby, let
Yeah.
me tell you something. All of us have trauma, and most of us have more trauma than we want to speak to. And let me go back to people asking me foul questions when I told them what I did. When I was bartending, usually would come from Black men. I would then give them, they would stay there. They would want to be intrigued. They'd have a couple more
Yeah.
drinks. And then guess what would come out? A disclosure of sexual assault or molestation.
Mm.
And let's be real, the reason we're uncomfortable talking about sexuality and why we have so much further to go is because we don't want to face our own traumas. And we choose to turn a blind eye and say things like, well, I got through it. Or they
Mm-hmm.
probably, and
Yeah.
again, it's so hard for us. And then you meet a bartender who says she wants to be a sexologist, or you meet a nice woman at a happy hour, and then you want to disclose and dump your trauma on her, which I have a
Mm-hmm.
strong back. I can bear that cross. I have been trained to bear that cross, but it hurts me so much to see my community
Mm-hmm.
hurting
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's funny. I was going to ask you, the way that your bio, your Instagram says exploring the social justice of sexuality. And I was going to ask you what that meant, but I feel like we done got there.
I mean, I wish I had so much more time to really,
Yeah.
I thank you
Yeah.
for allowing me this platform, because there's just so much we don't know. And if somebody's listening
Yeah.
to this and they're like, I feel like we went all up and down and around, I don't know where I am right now, that's good. That means you are
Yeah.
thinking about concepts you've not thought about before, and you're starting to see the web of social
Yeah.
justice. We talked about how I was hypersexualized as a very young woman. Do you know the rates? Young Black girls are like 2.5 times more likely to get in trouble at schools because of behavior and things about dress code. This is what I'm
Yeah.
telling you. That is sexuality issue, right?
And that's the baggage that we end up carrying into
Mm-hmm,
our 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, without even realizing. Like, honestly, the simplicity there
mm-hmm,
of not even realizing how that affects the way you look at yourself, or the way that you hide yourself later, or the way you're uncomfortable talking about certain things. And and to that point, it's just, we ignore it in our 30s, or we act like, oh well, this is just how it is.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I think that what's important about what you're saying, I mean, everything's important about what you're saying, but what I hope that people can take away is, both as adults, what trauma are we carrying,
And
big
how,
or small? Don't think because it's quote unquote small that it doesn't matter. And also, what can we do to positively impact future generations?
yeah,
And I think, my personal solution as a mom and listening to you is like, for me, it's like having conversation, communicating about, at the very least and at the earliest point, communicating about their bodies,
yep,
communicating honestly.
yep.
So hopefully we can give folks some tools to take away.
Listen, let me just give you the real tea, honey. First and foremost, let me give you them. Let me give you the gems. I mean, again, I could go on, but one,
Mm-hmm.
start examining the trauma that you have, and then
Mm-hmm.
find help. Find someone to talk
Yeah.
to. Find a therapist. That's
Yeah.
baseline.
Yeah.
Just find someone to talk to. Okay, there are a lot of
Yeah.
free programs and groups out there. That's one. Because what's going to happen is, if you don't at least face that trauma, you are going to project that out. So you're going to be hesitant to have those conversations. Next step, if you have small
Right.
children, I'm going to give you all the way through adulthood. Small children, start the conversations about body autonomy before they can speak. When you change the diaper, mommy's going
Right.
to wipe your bottom. And no, 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 it's not a hoo-ha. It's not a cookie. It is not a poom poom. It is not a
Right.
cash register, which I have heard,
Right. I've never heard that.
or a pocketbook. Pocketbook was problematic for me.
No.
So come on now. It is a penis. It is a vagina. It is a
Yeah.
butthole. It is your breasts. It is your anus. And the reason why is because language is important. If young
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
have language and they know they can tell you things, and you have made it clear your body is your body, nobody can touch your body without permission. Even if mommy
Mm-hmm.
and daddy are washing you, you should ask permission. Okay? Because that sets a
Mm-hmm.
baseline. So then if somebody does try to touch them, they will say, you can't, mommy says you cannot touch this. Okay, that is a protection
Mm-hmm.
method. Two, when your children
I
don't
agree.
want to go to an auntie or an uncle's house, or don't want to kiss somebody, or don't want to hold hands, or don't want to hug the pastor, do not make them. Children know their senses. If they don't want to do it, it's because something does not feel comfortable to them. Body autonomy is so big. Because again, you say, don't ever let anybody touch you. And if somebody does, you bring it to me. Because now you start the conversation. Then focus on
Yep.
friendship. So now we're talking ages 3 or ages 6 to 9. Really establish what healthy friendships look like and role model that. Okay. You have to be very mindful of the actions and behaviors that you display in front of your children. Now, I'm not going to
Yeah.
tell you to have an Instagram marriage. Do not do that. Fight, but effectively communicate and resolve the issue in front of your children, because
Yeah,
they are
absolutely.
watching you. So teach them to have arguments and disagreements in a healthy way, and establish what the standard of friendship looks like for your family. You have that power.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then, they're going to start asking. Robbie Williams is a great book person, and I'll email you this so you have it. They have books
Mm-hmm.
at every age. Babies don't come from storks. They come from vaginas through the process of sex, right? Sex is, you have to start telling
Yeah.
them. If I hear another parent say, I'll wait till the right time. No, there is no right time, because when people come to middle school or 5th grade or 4th grade with a smartphone, okay,
Yeah.
parents,
Oh yeah.
listen. Now you're like, they said something crazy. They have
Right.
access to everything. So start using all that's around you to establish what family norms are, and ask your kids, offer up
Yeah.
open-ended questions, and then be
Yep.
non-judgmental. I mean, there's so many ways. Non-judgmental.
Yeah.
Practice your
Yeah.
faces in the mirror.
Yeah, absolutely. Your responses, yes. And I would say, just adding to that, researching, right? Everything that you're saying is
Mm-hmm.
valid and super resourceful, but also as, parents researching how can you share this information with them in a way that's age appropriate, like you mentioned, talking to the kids about where babies come from and sex. So my oldest is 4, so we have a
Oh,
great book called What Makes a Baby. So while we haven't said the word sex yet, he knows the uterus, the vagina, the sperm, the egg. He knows that these things are necessary to make a
yes.
baby. He don't need
Yes.
to know right now uh
The
the
act.
rest.
No,
Yeah, the
exactly.
act.
Age
And
appropriate.
even this book is so beautiful because it also doesn't even say man or woman. It just says you need sperm, you need egg, you need a uterus. That's where the baby grows, so that there is not an attachment to who has
Yeah.
these parts. And
Yes.
I really appreciate that about the book too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really great books that don't specify gender that I love. One of the people I was saying was Robbie Harris, who does children's books.
Uh-huh.
Check her out. I think she does one called "Who's in My Family" that really celebrates family diversity,
Oh,
which
I
is
think I've
really
seen that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and they're all illustrated. Yeah, I think age appropriate sex ed is very
Yeah.
important. I
Yeah.
also tell parents this: if your child under 4 is masturbating, totally normal. Please do not shame them. Just remind them they cannot do that in public, and that you understand it's okay and it feels good to touch
Yeah.
your privates, your penis, your vagina, and then use it as a way to remind them nobody else should do that, because there are some
Yeah.
behaviors that are normal part of the
Yeah.
sexual maturation. Masturbation is one of them. Being exploratory and wanting to see other people's like what's under there, and so you can get ahead of
Yeah.
that with books that say a sperm, an egg, and things like that.
And not to be shocked by it. I had a nephew, and I was easily 5 years from having any of my own children. But I read an article, we don't touch our vulvas at the table. And I was like, I'm still obsessed with this article. I've like saved it. I share it with people because it was a really beautiful example of like something that can be very uncomfortable as a parent, but how to address it, how to
Mm-hmm.
talk to your kids about it. And it's like totally Googleable. We don't touch our vulvas at the table. So I just brought it up because it speaks to what you're saying, and was certainly a lesson that I carry with me.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I don't have any girls, but boys definitely touch themselves.
It
Okay.
actually, they touch themselves in the womb before they are born.
Yes, I've heard that.
Yeah,
But that makes sense. I mean, they're just touching all the things.
all the things.
Um, Okay, so I want to know more about you. You have
Oh,
given us all of these amazing resources, but I want to ask you a few questions.
okay, great.
So, we call this the beyond the persona questions, but like me, I know that what you do
Mhm.
is very much a part of who you are. So, it is what it is.
Right.
What is it that you can do today
Mhm.
that you were not capable of a year ago, or maybe thought you weren't capable of?
This very conversation, one thing that I've been working on is just being not afraid of my own truth, and not being afraid of being raw and unapologetic. Like, I could be a whole hell of a lot more unapologetic and raw, but the inner Catholic in me, the little Sunday school girl. So really
Yeah.
fighting that, and I think I've gotten better over time. Yeah, because this takes confidence and it takes self-love.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you experience self-doubt?
Everywhere. I shouldn't be, but I have imposter syndrome. I sometimes struggle with race, being biracial.
Mhm.
I've told people this. 2020 was very,
Yeah.
I mean, every year is hard. We do not talk about this in our community enough. Being biracial is very difficult. Being biracial in 2020 was a shit show. So I struggle there
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah. I think I want to have an entire other conversation about this
Yeah.
because, I'll give you a snippet and then we'll do this again one day.
Yeah.
But running Black Love, my husband and I intentionally created the series and the brand as a whole as a space where we could show Black people in loving relationships whenever and wherever they find it. And that meant with people that weren't Black, that meant LGBTQ. All of that was very important to us because we wanted to show Black people in loving relationships. And we're constantly challenged on it, right? As the brand's profile has grown on social media, we've seen the response to when we post photos of an interracial couple or just a freaking light-skinned person. And it's deeply frustrating to me to see that dissension in our community, and that's a constant conversation, and that there's hate shared. Now, granted, don't get me wrong, the good outweighs the bad, but the haters are loud. They really have a lot of pride in what they say. And so I am not biracial, but I see it every day via our brand. And while I say it pains me, I understand it hits you in a different way. But I feel you. And oh, girl, I could talk about this for a while. So what do you want? How do you want to be remembered?
Oh, as a change maker, as a scholarship, perhaps a library. I really just want to make a big enough footprint on the world that it can change the landscape that benefits my community, right? That benefits humanity. I want to be remembered as somebody, Michelle Hope extraordinaire. There are so many things I want to do, but they are all rooted in reproductive justice. I'd love to, be remembered as the person that got federally mandated sex education that's inclusive, age appropriate, medically accurate, K through 12 as a standard in America, because we deserve reproductive justice. We deserve social justice, and they're not separate. There are so many things that's where I would want to go.
I love that. If there's anything that I can do to help, I am here to be a voice and support, because I would love for you to be known for that, and I would love to support it. I think it's vitally important. But one thing that I wanted to chat about was 2020 just being a difficult year for a lot of folks. And I know you've talked about this on your socials, just that it was a time where you experienced some depression.
Yes, child.
How did you, and you're not alone, how did you, or how are you working through that, pulling yourself out of that? What does that look like?
First of all, thank you for asking. It is an everyday thing. I think people have to understand the rates of mental health right now and struggles with mental health have skyrocketed. You just asked me what my biggest struggle is, or where I have the least amount of confidence. And it definitely is being biracial. 2020 just gutted me. I'm a people person. That was cut off. I had quit my job of 7 years in January that I loved, but I knew I had to take the next step. And then I had another great job, and then everything shut down. And then George Floyd happened, and then I was shutting down bridges, and I was marching, and I shot a digital documentary. Then it got colder, and then you're still alone. So for me, it was just this wave of emotion with no space to process. So counseling, I have really good resources there, thank God. And I'm on vacation right now in the wilderness, where I need
prioritizing self, hopefully.
Still working, but just being out of the city has been, and out of the apartment and out of New York, because I try to tell people this all the time, and maybe you understand it because you're in LA now, but last April and March and May in New York was probably the hardest time of my life, because there was just nobody. There was nothing, and you had no end in sight. So marching did good for me. Exercise does good for me. Meditation, masturbation. Let me not lie to you. There's been quite a bit of that. And just really face masks and trying to prioritize self more than I ever have in my life. So that's the upswing of 2020. And 2021 is starting, obviously, with some difficulties. We still have a long way to go, but conversations like this help. And just, it's going to be there tomorrow. So take care of yourself today.
Right. Do you feel better now, than you did a year ago?
Well, Donald Trump is no longer in the news cycle in the way that he was. So my stress
That's a win.
my stress and anxiety levels have definitely lowered. I'm now anxious that there's not any news on because we are trying to heal from the trauma of the crazy news cycle.
Yeah.
I do feel way more positive of an outlook. I feel really positive about 2021. I don't know if that's my own personal things. I don't know if that's our country.
That's good though. Doesn't
we just have a lot of work?
We all got to find something. Yeah.
Yes, Lord.
Yeah, but you have to have things to look forward to. And
absolutely.
Sure, there's collective things like thank you, Kamala and Biden, and then there's our personal things. And so, yeah, I'm glad that
I'm
you
really
have both
excited. Yes, case. And I have professional things. You know, and I am really excited for this. I've been working with an app company called Community X. It's a social network for social good. So it's created by change makers for change makers. And what the app does is it centers your social justice cause areas. So things you care about. And for me, a sexologist, reproductive justice, I got involved some months back, and we are now about to release a new feature and a new app launch. And I'm so thrilled. And we have to find new places to have conversations about moving the needle in all the areas that we've just discussed. Mainstream media has really done a number on the narratives of Black voices and the Black experience. And I think we have to find other ways to mobilize and find new spaces. Because I get shadow banned all the time on social media, and I'm just trying to teach people how to be healthier in a healthier sex space. So how are we going to get to federally mandated sex ed if we can't get it on the gram? But you can get a booty challenge on the gram. You see what I'm saying here? This is what I'm talking about.
Last night, I saw I was going to say a grown man, thankfully not a child, but I saw a man's silhouette challenge. A naked man. Let me just put it on the Twitter.
Listen,
full on naked man.
I appreciate all of these things. Okay, it's a part of the spectrum. But if we're going to allow for that, can I at least teach people what a vulva is and how to put on a condom correctly too? Can you not shadow ban that or shut down my post because I'm trying to teach people in a positive way to understand why this man and his dang-a-lang is flopping around on some type of challenge? Okay, there's got to be context here, people. We can't just...
Absolutely.
Like, I think that's...
Absolutely.
It just, so I think, we need new places that aren't censored in the same way. And I really would love it if y'all united with me. You can go to the website, www.communityx.tech, join the wait list, join my coalition, because we're going to get this sex ed in. Get in that sex ed coalition. We're going to get in there.
And we'll be sure to share all the links as well.
Absolutely.
Because you are an incredible resource, and I really look forward to this app and to our schools having sex education. Thanks to Michelle Hope, we're gonna make it happen. We're gonna make it happen.
Can I say one more thing? This is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a legislative year. This is a year for y'all to get into your local legislative voting situation. And let me tell you where sex ed starts. Starts at superintendents. Okay, so I have been marching. I have been saying this, and I got this from a speech somewhere. I have done the demonstration. So now it's time to do the legislation, which means you guys have to vote people in that are going to be pro sex ed in schools, pro inclusive education in schools. Okay, so parents, go to the school board meetings, join the PTA, ask questions. This is really, really important.
I'm with you. I appreciate it. So listen, Michelle, there's a lot of takeaways here, but I love just learning about you and your background. And we are very much aligned in terms of the importance of our community having the resources, and the resources being the conversation at the very least around both mental wellness and therapy and sex education, starting with learning our biology as children. And so I'm just thrilled that we're able to have this conversation. Aside from the Community X website, let folks know where to follow you.
Oh, you can follow me on all social media. Okay. So that's at MHSEXPERT. MHSexpert. Unapologetic, real, raw, you get what you get.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle.
I really appreciate you so much. Yeah, this is good times.
All right. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to catch the new season of Black Love every Friday on OWN at 10/9 Central.